Because if we have a better understanding as to how the nerves in the body work, then we will be in a better position to understand some of the recommendations that we make as far as what are those things that we should do as far as our behaviors that will either improve or enhance health or can actually destroy or reduce our health. And when we talk about certain activities like not drinking alcohol, not smoking, not using sugar, not using coffee, not using illegal drugs, not using aspartame, not using MSG, after a while it can get pretty discouraging. You're saying, yeah, all you're saying is telling us what we can't do. So what I try to do is to help people to understand the why behind those recommendations. And you're not going to fully understand the why unless you understand how the body works. If you understand how the body works, then you can get a better understanding as to why there are certain things that we should not do, because when you understand what those things do to the body, then you understand, oh, that's why they say not to do these things. So for those of you who come back this afternoon, I'll give a brief review of what we talked about last night, and I think that will be very valuable to help you understand why we make those type of recommendations. Before I start, I'd like to offer a word of prayer. Can we bow our heads? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you again for another Sabbath day. We thank you for not only being our Creator, but also our Redeemer. You have also stated that you are the great physician. And when we suffer ill health or illness or disease, we can always call upon you to ask you through your Spirit to be with us, to guide us and help us to do the right things so that we can regain our health again. And for those of us who are sick and suffering, we can always call upon you to be by our sides to help us. But at the same time, we also ask that you will give us the strength that we will need in order to do those things that will help to enhance and promote health. So again, we ask for your Holy Spirit and your presence to be here with us this morning. I pray that the words that I speak may not be from me, but from you. And may those who are listening to these words, may we all be drawn closer to you, is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. When Jesus was here on earth, did he spend more time preaching or healing? Healing. Yes, he spent much more time healing. And many of us are aware of that. When he died on the cross and he was resurrected, he spoke to his disciples and he gave them what we term the Gospel Commission. The Gospel Commission that was given to his disciples, did it only involve preaching? No. If we look at Matthew chapter 10, verse 7 and 8, you can see that when Christ sent out the 12 disciples on their first missionary tour, he bade them, as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And what's the first thing that he said? Did he say preach? No, he said heal the sick, cleanse the lepers. which is another form of healing. Raise the dead. But that goes even beyond healing. Okay? And cast out devils. So here we see, here in Matthew 10:7-8, that he talks about the fact that we are to do the work, the ministry of healing. Casting out devils. Do you think there are people who are possessed today among us? Do you think that the only people who are possessed are in Nigeria or Congo or South America or India? Are those the only places where people are demon-possessed? No. People are possessed right here in the United States. And how they came about to be possessed is another long story. Now, unfortunately, when we talk or think about the ministry of healing, we tend to only think about it in the physical realm. And I will use my experience as an example. In all of my educational life, I only spent 2 years outside of a Seventh-day Adventist institution. I'm talking about from grade 1 till advanced training in medicine. I only spent 2 years outside of the Adventist institution. 1 year was 3rd grade. I went to a public school for 3rd grade. And my first year of residency in internal medicine. That was not in an Adventist institution. But all the rest, all the way up through high school, through college, through medical school, and through my postgraduate training after you graduate from medical school, has all been done in Adventist institutions. However, when I went to medical school and advanced training, postgraduate training and residency, we concentrated a lot on the physical. Unfortunately, we were not, or I was not as prepared to deal with the spiritual. And if we had an issue of a patient needing spiritual needs, who do we call? Chaplain. Now, I have nothing against chaplains. They do a good job. Okay? But is that biblical? That dichotomy between healing and the spiritual? Is that biblical? Is that supported by the spirit of prophecy? No. And Jesus here talks about the fact that not only are we to heal, but cast out devils. And I'm working on doing a series of presentations on the mind. And I am learning and gathering evidence and material that will show us how some people become possessed. Okay? And there are certain things, there are certain behaviors that we should not be engaged in order to protect ourselves from becoming possessed. Now, I'm not talking about the obvious things. I'm talking about things that are more subtle. I'm not talking about, don't go and buy a Ouija board. Yeah, of course we shouldn't do that. Or play Dungeons and Dragons and these crazy games. I'm not talking about that. You should not do that, by the way. But I'm talking about other more subtle things. Like, let me give you one example. And I'm working on it and I'll gather more evidence. Be very careful of what you are listening to or watching when you are lying down to go to sleep. Be very careful. Because when you are transitioning from being fully awake to that time when you are just going off to sleep, your brainwave activity changes. And during that transition, there is some evidence, and pretty good evidence, that what you are listening to can directly get into your mind, and because you are going through that transitional period, your filtering ability of the mind is shutting down so that anything that you hear just goes straight in. That's one behavior that we should be very careful about. Another one that we should be very careful about is very controversial. And that is, be very careful to the types of music that you listen to. And I'm not just talking about heavy metal, punk, rock and roll, rap. I'm not just talking about that. I am talking about music that is highly repetitious. Be very, very careful. I will share this with you right now, but I know that I also will back it up with evidence, scientific evidence. When music is very, very repetitious, it can induce a form of hypnosis. And a lot of the what is called contemporary Christian music is very repetitious. A lot of the gospel music is very repetitious. Be very careful about that. Okay? Anyway, I wasn't planning to get into that, but when I saw Cast Out Devils, one of the things that I have noticed when at one time I was the physician for student health for some of our colleges around here. And I will be doing that again starting next week. But and I'm talking about major colleges that have 15,000 students, 10,000 students. And one of the things that after watching I went to a presentation done by a non-Adventist gentleman about rap music and where rap comes from, where hip-hop comes from. This was about 5 or 6 years ago at one of our churches. And at that time, I don't listen to rap. I don't know much about where it came from and all of that. I do know some of the artists because, I listen to the news, so I hear about some of them. But I was shocked and surprised when I saw at one of our churches this gentleman doing this presentation talking about the history of hip-hop culture, etc. And the response of the audience was something that I've never experienced ever in my life. When he threw up a name of a very popular artist, people were crying, gasps. People were leaving the church crying. When he presented the fact that a lot of these artists are Satanists. And these are the people we worship. We have their posters in our room. And the Bible talks about a familiar spirit. It's like it's like you think you know these people and you're in love with these people. You don't know them. So why do you think you know them? Familiar spirit? Okay. Anyway, I wasn't planning to get into all of that, but To the 70, Jesus said, into whatsoever city ye enter, heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. So you go, you heal the sick, and then you tell them God's kingdom is here. This is a formula that Jesus himself gave to his disciples before he left. Are we utilizing this formula effectively today? The presence and power of Christ was with them. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. After Christ's ascension, a different work is to be done. Is that what it says? This ministry of healing. No, it says the same work was continued. The scenes of his own ministry were repeated. Out of the cities round about there came a multitude unto Jerusalem, bringing sick folks, and them which were vexed with unclean spirits. And they were healed, every one. Everyone was healed. The message of health is a powerful message that we need to pay more attention to. And part of the reason why this message is not heeded is because I believe that this is one of the most unpopular messages today for us. And why is it so unpopular? Because we are not living up to what health reform really is. So I have made a commitment to the Lord that before I speak, I go over the 10 laws of health. You know, when I was in Jamaica for 1 year. And I did my internship there. And one of the things that struck me in the way that they train doctors there is in the British system. And in the British system of training physicians, they don't give you a whole bunch of things to study that you are hardly ever going to see in your whole career. What they do is they concentrate on the more common things, and they drill you over and over and over and over again until you could be dreaming and you're dreaming it. It becomes a part of you. Repetition over and over and over and over again. So if this is a broken record, I'm sorry, but it's important. So let's talk about the 10 laws of health. And if you were here last night, you will understand why I emphasize this over and over. And let's do it differently this time as how we did it last time. We will do it in the order as it's laid out in the Spirit of Prophecy and Ministry of Healing. So, when we come to the laws of health, what is the first one? Okay, let me write it out here for myself. Okay, so you can say new start, but this is the order in which it's laid out in the Spirit of Prophecy. So what's the first one? It's not nutrition. The first one is ear, as it's laid out in the order in the Spirit of Prophecy. Okay? First one is ear. And there can be an argument that this is probably the proper order by level of importance, from the most important going down. There can be an argument made for that. Okay? Now some people will say, no, we must put trust in God first. Right? Have you heard that? Okay. But that's not the order she laid out in Ministry of Healing. And there is one potential reason for that I could think of. If your brain isn't working properly, how can you trust in God? How are you going to know about God? So the first one is ear. How long can you go without breathing? Not very long. Okay? So ear. Do we pay a lot of attention today about ear quality? Yes. Not really. We do. Okay, good. But you know what? If you really want to pay a lot of attention to ear quality, you shouldn't be living in the cities. Okay? And that's another very unpopular message. Out of the cities into the country. And that message of moving out of the cities and going into the country is very much an integral part of health reform. So you see, the whole area of health and health reform is not a popular message. Okay? All right, so ear is number one. Number two, sunlight. My dermatology colleagues have done a very effective job of scaring the whole world about sun. Like, avoid it like the plague. But that's a totally misguided approach. Let me come back to that. Because what is the third one? Third law. Temperance. Is temperance important? Because you see, that's where we get into trouble. Sunlight is not bad for you. Too much sunlight is bad for you. Too little sunlight is bad for you. So instead of overreacting because people are intemperate, of going out baking themselves in the sun all day, sunbathing, then we all are freaked out and say, oh, avoid the sun at all costs. That's wrong. Temperance is extremely important. Even for those things that are good, if we are not temperate, they will create problems. Okay? All right, what's the fourth one? Rest. Now, in our society, do we pay a lot of attention to rest? No. I lived for 7 years in Mexico. That's where I did medical school. And one of the things that I never got accustomed to was there were occasions when I would want to go downtown to buy something, and I would go, and I walk downtown, and then when I get there like 12:30, I forgot. I'm not in the United States. I'm in Mexico. The stores are closed. Why? Siesta. Siesta is from 12 to 2. They open later on in the evening. So many times I went down, I forgot siesta. Do we have siestas here? Formal siestas where businesses close down, where you can go home, eat with your family, take a little nap, and then come back? No. Okay. So we don't pay a lot of attention to rest. And one of the things that I am quite surprised by is how many people really get so little sleep. Okay. Well, yeah, but most of my patients aren't medical students. And thank God, I thank God that during medical school, on average, I would get about 7 hours of sleep. Look, some of my friends during medical school, remember this is an Adventist medical school where most of us are Adventists. I had friends who were drinking coffee, staying up late, doing all kind of crazy stuff. I never did that. Okay? I never drank coffee, never drink Coca-Cola in all my life. Okay? Because to me that didn't make any sense. If I'm tired, I need sleep. So I would study maybe until 11, 12, and then I go to bed and wake up maybe 6, 6:30, whatever. Okay? Well, let me not get into that. But on weekends, that's when I crashed. Okay? Okay. So rest is also very, very important. Do you know that if you don't get proper rest, do you know you can die of heart failure? There's a condition called obstructive sleep apnea. And if that is a condition where because of blockage to the airway, when you're sleeping, your oxygen level in your blood drops. When that drops, your brain doesn't like that because your brain needs oxygen. About 20% of the oxygen consumed in your body is consumed by your brain, which is only 2% of your body's weight. So your brain doesn't like that. So what will your brain do? It will wake you up. So I hope you don't mind this being unholy, but it may save someone's life. If you have a spouse or someone in your house or your neighbor, and you can even hear your neighbor, okay? It's not simple snoring. It's the snoring, and then you hear nothing, and then gasping. They're waking up. Okay? That is a sign of obstructive sleep apnea. If you have someone in your family who is like that, see your doctor and get a sleep study. It could save their lives. Okay? All right. So rest is very important. E, exercise. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So diet is number 6. Number 7 is water. Number 8, trusting God. Okay, and I add 2 more. B is benevolence. And it's all throughout the Spirit of Prophecy, the importance of the benevolent work, ministry of healing, medical ministry. Okay? And G is gratitude. These are the 10 laws of health. Okay? The reason why I stress this is that when I hear people ask certain questions of health professionals, based on the questions that are asked, I know that they do not understand this concept of the 10 laws of health. Because if they did, there are certain questions they won't ask. You want me to give you an example? Doctor, I have heartburn. What can I take for the heartburn? That person does not understand the concept of the 10 laws of health. Because if they did, they won't ask that question. You know what question they would ask? First of all, you don't need to ask the doctor. You ask yourself. So what you would do is you would say, okay, I have heartburn. Why am I having heartburn? So you need to determine what the cause is, right? Not trying to figure out what the solution is. Find out what the cause is. So you look at the 10 laws and you say, okay, is it a problem with air or sunlight or temperance? Temperance, that could be an issue. So we are to examine ourselves to find out why we are having this problem. You don't need to run to the doctor for everything. Really, the doctor is there for more serious things. Okay. At my clinic, one of the things that I'm going to be working on is health education. And I'm not just talking the regular run-of-the-mill health education, a real health education. Because a lot of my patients, I would say roughly half of my patients don't need to come to the clinic. There are things that they can deal with on their own, but they don't have the knowledge. Okay? And I'm not saying that to condemn anyone. Hey, when a problem happens with my car, I don't know what to do. I take it to the mechanic. But I know that that's not really what I should be doing. I should know more about how my car works. So I talk to my wife, because her father is a mechanic. So I am very ignorant when it comes to cars. So I'm sympathetic when people are not as well informed about their bodies. But hey, it's your body. You should know more about that. Okay? All right. So if you have heartburn, you look at temperance and you look at diet. Those are the two major causes of it. So what am I eating? Am I eating regular meals? Am I eating too late at night? These are the questions you should be asking yourself. Not coming to the doctor to get an antacid or H2 blocker, like omeprazole or whatever, cimetidine and all these things. No. Find out what is the cause. What law have you violated? And then when you determine that, change it. Now, if you're having some other problems, you can't figure it out, then go to the doctor. But most doctors are not going to think along those lines. So you come to me now, and you say, I have heartburn. And I will say, okay, let's go over them. And I will help you find out what the cause is. And then after a while, people say, man, I don't like that doctor. Nah, I'm going to go to another one. So they go to another doctor. Hey, doctor, I got heartburn. Oh, okay. Take this. Ah, good doctor. Got that other one? Bad doctor. Gets into too much of my business. Right? Okay. So 6 is diet. Okay. All right. So frontal lobe function. Frontal lobe is part of the brain that's involved with these various functions. It's involved with, can I get the pointer? It involves with judgment. It's involved with reason. Do you notice that it seems like people have a hard time reasoning properly today? Have you noticed that? Sure. Okay, reasoning is a very important function of the brain. Intellect is also a very important function. Your morals. Your willpower. I remember, my father's a retired minister. And I remember at age 7, he was holding a series of evangelistic meetings. And he was preaching righteousness by faith. And I always remembered him saying that when man sinned, that relationship with God was broken. And therefore, if we are to establish a right relationship with God, to reestablish that connection with God, it involves the will. You have to want to reestablish a right connection with God. Right? Choice. The will. If you are living a lifestyle that damages the frontal lobe, does that affect your will or your willpower? Yes, it does. Is it going to make it harder or easier for you to come back to God? Harder. So many times when we hold our, and I'm not against evangelistic meetings. I'm not against it. Okay? I grew up in that environment. But why are we only focusing on the spiritual and not on the physical? Recently, I was asked to be involved in an evangelistic meeting. And they were going to do, and again, I am saying these things not out of a spirit of criticism, but I'm saying it to say, let's do better. And it's not coming from me. It's coming from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. Recently, my wife and I were asked to be involved in a Revelation evangelistic meetings. And I said, okay, fine. And so we were getting more information. And guess how much time we were given? 5 minutes. You know what? I said, no, thank you. This afternoon, TJ is going to talk more about our plans on what we want to do involving like gardening. We're going to actually have a garden system that's revolutionary. That you can grow healthy food you don't even need soil, but you can do it. Okay? So come back this afternoon and he will elaborate about that. But what we need to do is to have health evangelism. And not put health 5 minutes at the beginning or at the end. To me, that is not biblical. And then we wonder why our results are so faulty. If people are sick physically, which impacts their frontal lobe function, they're going to have a harder time understanding spiritual things because their minds are going to be clouded. And I mentioned this, I think, the last time I was here. Pastor Cortez shared with me his experiences working at a lifestyle center. And he said, I got permission from him to share his name. And he told me that when people would come to the lifestyle center, thank you. Okay. When people would come to the lifestyle center, they would have morning and evening worship. And most of these people didn't come. They had no interest, no desire. And what he shared with me was that by the third day, after they go through the cleanse program and the detoxification, what happens to their minds? Their minds are beginning to clear up. And you know the interesting thing that happened? Now these people would come to morning and evening worship and participate and benefit from it. If we are out there trying to evangelize the world for God, and with Revelation seminars, you know those solemn messages from Revelation, and we're going to the general public, but the general public, they're sick, physically, emotionally, mentally. How are they going to comprehend what we're trying to share with them? We need to do it the other way. Go to them with the health message. Then when they start to change their lifestyle and behaviors and detox, then what will happen to their frontal lobe? It will be clearer. Now they can understand and perceive spiritual things. Do we do that? Organization, your ability to organize yourself, is a very important function of the frontal lobe. Foresight is one of the highest functions of the frontal lobe. You know how important foresight is? Okay, today I need to decide what I'm going to do. Am I going to drink alcohol and go to a party? Or am I going to stay home and study? If I have foresight, I will recognize that, you know what? Staying home and study is more important than having a good time. Because in studying, I can see down a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road that I am bettering myself to serve God and to serve my fellow man. That's the purpose of education, you know. It's not to get a lot of degrees so that I can, you know, I'm kind of surprised. A lot of my friends, if you ever dare call them by their first name instead of their title, they get upset. Now, I understand. In a professional environment, yes, it's important to call people by their titles because you're in a professional environment. I'm not talking about being in a professional environment. I'm talking about like at church. Anyway. So, foresight, to be able to see down the road, is very important. But if I don't have foresight because I'm drinking on weekends, or I, smoke a little marijuana here, and some people say they smoke marijuana because it's a natural product. Okay, you didn't get that. Or I drink a little bit of coffee on the side, or use some sugar, or aspartame, or MSG in my cooking, because I need the food to taste good. What does that do to your frontal lobe? What does that do to your foresight? And then now you're wondering, why am I making bad decisions? Could it be that it's because of what your lifestyle is? Avenues to the soul. We all know that we are supposed to guard the avenues to the soul. Is that right? Why? Why should we guard the avenues to the soul? Otherwise, Satan will have entrance. And as I mentioned earlier, be very careful of what you listen to or look at while you are going to sleep. Be very careful of what you listen to and what you watch when you are going to sleep. Because that's a very vulnerable time when your brainwave activities change, and during that time, a portal is opened up to your mind, to your soul. And if you're not careful, Satan can use that to get in. Frontal lobe is very important. In a man, it occupies about 33 to 38% of the brain, much more than other animals. So if you live an unhealthy lifestyle, it can chip away at the function of the frontal lobe like a drip of water wears down a stone. You may not notice any change today or tomorrow or next week, but you are being affected negatively. So, this afternoon I will get into the physiology of how a nerve transmits electrical impulses. But let me just reiterate that point that I made last night in describing that. Your body's ability, your nerves, the ability of your nerves to transmit electrical activity is a very finely tuned mechanism. Very finely tuned. And this is information I got from my medical physiology textbook, Guyton, who's considered the Bible of physiology and medicine. And when I studied this, for the nerve to be able to change from a state of rest to a state where it will transmit electrical activity, that change happens very rapidly. The only way I can describe it is if you take 1 second, tick, 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 that's 1 second, right? Roughly. You take the time of 1 second, and you chop it up into 10,000 equal parts between the beginning and 1 second. You chop it up into 10,000 equal parts. The change that occurs in your nerve to change from being at rest to transmit an electrical impulse occurs in 1/10,000th of a second. The movement of what we call ions, sodium. You don't need a lot of movement of these charged particles to cause this process to occur. You need as little as 1 particle for every 30 million or even as much as 100 million. So you have 100 million particles out there, you only need 1 in proportion to move, to change, to bring about that ability of the nerve to transmit an electrical impulse. And how fast does these electrical impulses run? I mentioned that we always watch the 100-meter dash at the Olympics. The world record is 9.57 or 9.62 seconds to cover 100 meters. There are some nerves, not all of them, but there are some nerves that travel as fast as 100 meters per second. It's a very finely tuned mechanism for the nerves to transmit information or impulses. And one change, what I mentioned last night, can transmit as much as 100,000 individual impulses. This frontal lobe, where these changes are occurring, is how God communicates with us and how we communicate with Him and how we can perceive spiritual things using our intellect, reason, memory, judgment, foresight. And then we want to wonder, well, why I can't drink alcohol? Why I can't have that energy drink? Because these things disrupt the normal functioning of how your nerves work. That's one of the reasons why illegal drugs are very dangerous, because they change your ability to perceive things. And I hear, well, the Surgeon General and the doctors, they say you can drink in moderation. A little bit of wine to help lower your risk for heart disease. Okay, granted, let's say that is true, which I don't have an argument with. As I mentioned last night, I taught a course at Valley College for 10 years in medical aspects of addiction. I spent 15 minutes talking about the positive effects of alcohol. And then I spent the next 3 weeks talking about the negative. Is that a reason to use wine because it may lower your risk of heart disease? We have other, more powerful ways of lowering your risk of heart disease that does not involve the use of wine or alcohol. But do we promote that? No. When I give the advice to my patients, it's like, oh, he's taking away all my good stuff. And then we wonder why we're so sick. So these are the things that we need to watch out for. Oh well. We need to watch out for, coffee. I mean, every Adventist knows they're not supposed to drink coffee, right? Well, it's working. Okay, thank you. Yes, I got it. One time my wife was at church, and she mentioned that to this person that Ellen G. White said some things and said this. And this is an Adventist lady she was talking to. The Adventist lady said, Ellen G. who? Does she come to our church? My wife has many very interesting stories. But above and beyond coffee and alcohol and in drugs, which illegal drugs that we know we shouldn't be using sugar, white sugar, and we shouldn't be using aspartame or MSG. Because you know what? Satan is very smart. You see, I'm not here to say how great and how smart he is. That's not my point. The point I'm trying to make is that we are still struggling with kindergarten stuff, and Satan has moved on to university stuff. We're still struggling about meat and dairy. We should be addressing things like aspartame and MSG, but we're still struggling over meat and dairy, which is kindergarten, basic level stuff. I have 5 more minutes. I will get into more detail this afternoon as to why MSG and aspartame is bad for you. It's bad for you because it affects your brain function. Let me just give a brief synopsis of it, and then we'll get into it in more detail. Aspartame and MSG are what we call excitotoxins. They overstimulate the nerves in your brain. This overstimulation can eventually lead to nerve damage and nerve death. And the mechanism is through a receptor called the NMDA receptor that glutamate binds to. It opens up calcium channels. Calcium moves from the outside of the nerve to the inside of the nerve, causes depolarization. The nerve can transmit electrical activity. Then repolarization occurs. The nerve goes back to normal. Those of you who were here last night, that kind of made sense. It overly stimulates the brain. Alcohol, on the other hand, operates through GABA receptors, which cause a sedating effect on the nerves. So the nerves are not able to transmit electrical activity as well. Okay? White sugar. One of the most toxic substances around. If you have a wound, infection, that's not healing, or you're having problems with it, I'll share with you a natural remedy that you can use. Get some white sugar, make it into a little paste, pack the wound with white sugar, and wrap it for like 8 to 12 hours. Any organism in there that's alive, the white sugar will kill it. I used it this week on a patient who had a very bad foot ulcer, one of the worst types. And I told them to do this because they were pumping him with powerful antibiotics. That was creating an issue for him. The antibiotics themselves were creating an issue for him. So now we were running out of options. So I said, let me check. So I double checked to make sure on my facts. And then I said, pack it with white sugar. The next morning, pus was coming out. And it was actually clearing up the wound. So if white sugar can do that on an ulcer on your foot, what does it do when you are drinking it and it goes into your GI tract? It doesn't kill off all the bad bacteria. Don't think that, okay? Well, it will kill off the good bacteria, okay? Okay, 3 more minutes. Why is white sugar bad for you? It's bad for you on a number of levels. Refined processed foods, including white sugar, will impact your behavior. Do you hear what I'm saying? It will impact on your behavior and your ability to think clearly. This is how it goes. You eat white sugar or refined sugars, cookies, crackers, okay, and I'm not even getting into the aspartame and MSG yet. But you eat refined processed foods, what does that do to your blood sugar level? Goes up, right? Okay. Does it go up slowly like if you were eating an apple or an orange or a grape? No. How does it go up? Fast, okay? When that happens, the poor body, oh, this is more than we can handle. So what happens? They send messages to the pancreas, say, hey, produce insulin now. So the poor pancreas, okay, I got to pump it out. So the pancreas is working hard, and it produces a lot of insulin. But it produces too much. So what happens? The insulin gets in there, grabs the sugar, takes it into the cell. What happens to your blood sugar level? Drops, but drops too much. So you go way down. What is that called? Hypoglycemia. We now know that when you become hypoglycemic, it affects the function of the brain. And we have scientific evidence to show that a lot of criminal behaviors that people are engaged in occurs due to reactive hypoglycemia. Do you know, have you ever wondered why at sporting events or soccer games, why they ban selling alcohol after like the 7th inning at a baseball game or whatever? Well, they shouldn't sell it there at all. But what happens is when you drink alcohol, one of the negative impacts is that it can cause hypoglycemia. That is one of the reasons why when you see people who are not drinking, they're more or less sober. But when they start drinking, bar fights break out, all kind of stuff. Why? Because their blood sugars drop. When your blood sugars drop, then now your adrenal glands have to produce epinephrine and norepinephrine. Because your body is saying the blood sugars are too low. The brain needs fuel to function. If the brain doesn't get fuel to function, you're going to be in trouble. You can die. So everything now is geared towards correcting this overcorrection of your high blood sugars that occurred from eating sugar or processed foods. So the adrenal glands pump out adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine and epinephrine to try and bring up your blood sugars. And if that doesn't work, then your pituitary gland gets into the picture and starts producing growth hormones to mobilize fat that can use it to produce sugar. So you have your adrenal glands, maybe you have your pituitary, then you may have your thyroid coming into the picture. But when your blood sugars are low, you become hyperactive. You become agitated. So somebody says something to you that normally, no big thing. You fly off the handle, pull gun, pull knife, shoot, kill people. That's what happens. And then we wonder why we have such a hard time overcoming temptation and sin. Check what you're eating. I'm saying this to myself too. Because like you, I struggle like everyone else. But watch what you eat. So the question is, does physical health impact spiritual health? What do you think the answer to that is? I rest my case. This afternoon we will talk a little bit more about that. And we'll talk about our plans for our medical missionary school. And in our school, we will be providing lectures like this for our students so that you can understand not just what we should do that is right and what we should avoid that's not right, but why. So you'll understand how the body works. So this afternoon at 2, we'll have further discussions on that. Please come back, invite your friends to come. And we're going to have an informal discussion too, so that if you have ideas about how we can be more effective in running a medical missionary school and to do outreach to the cities, that is our goal and our mission. So please come back this afternoon. We want all of you to participate, and we want all of you to have the opportunity to participate in our school and in our ministry. Thank you very much.
Lord Jesus, I long to be perfect.